check.
as she relayed and relieved information regarding the current flow of weavings within the span of nanoseconds. And by the time that even a single second had passed, she felt an even heavier weight on her shoulder, as if she had experienced a whole day. She looked towards the commander of the opposing legion, as they seemed to have similar dark expressions, a dialogue being opened once more as the martial Empress Yelena floated towards her again. In the midst of two massive
Let's
legions,
see what
these
that
two women
sounds
gazed
like.
at each other as before Yelena could even open her mouth. Yes,
And we mix
all
that with
weavings
the
for everyone
game.
show the exact same result. Complete cessation. The elder Queen Mother of Dignity uttered out coldly, as the expression on Yelena became even more unsightly. She didn't even have to ask this question
Let's
before
see
she
how
got
this
a reply,
goes.
as she sighed deeply in her heart, gazing at this representative of the
Hopefully we
Sanctus
can
Populi as she voiced out
adjust the
calmly.
resolution on the game. Was at
The Imperium will put
1440
all
by
legions on hold as we gain a better understanding of this situation.
900
I've
plus
been given orders to
960 maybe.
designate this location as an existential salvus domain. A representative among the pillars of the Imperium will come as the Sanctus Populi, and the Imperium share their findings and countermeasures for what is to come. Words that were sufficient enough to cause immense shock echoed out from Martial Empress Yelena. The Imperium said what? Seeing the eyes of incredulity and distrust from the Elder Queen Mother, Martial Empress Yelena could understand them very well, as even she was taken back. She expected the same pushback and belligerence as before, with those above her remaining staunch on what they wished to do on their glorious view of the Omniverse. Yet the cessation of all weavings had spooked them much more than even the weavings of cataclysm that were spreading. Those weavings were heard about from others.
So
The
no
complete
crashes,
cessation of all
hopefully.
possible paths, all of them felt it, regardless of how powerful they were. It gave them such a shock that they even did the unthinkable. The Great Imperium created a dialogue with another faction, and even proposed looking for countermeasures together. What a change! What a ridiculous change from the occurrence of a single
Okay,
event.
where am I?
It was so heavy that due to wanting to protect their own interests, or ensure their ineffable longevity, the Imperium actually brought the Sanctus Populi to the table. Both the Elder Queen Mother of Dignity
It's a
and
big
Martial
girl.
Empress Yelena allowed such a reality to settle in their minds as they gazed at each other. The gaze of the Elder Queen Mother remaining difficult and cautious as she
I
replied,
need to find
I
some
will pass the word. Caution, uncertainty.
some good
These
lights.
weavings were buzzing in overabundance at this moment, as towards an extremely uncertain future filled with multiple waves on the collapse of reality, an interesting reality began to unfold. The decisions were made within the span of a second, and the weavings of existence carried on. Within the inner domain of Pompeii, Martial Emperor Shi and his legions absorbed the dazzling glow of the silver sea around them with stern expressions. The gaze of Martial Emperor Shi constantly changing at the last second as he received newer
I wish
and
those
newer
are really attached to the
information.
legs.
He continued to monitor the figure of the devilishly handsome man with a gorgeous woman along with two omniversal pillagers, as well as the large groups of titanic omniversal pillagers even further within the depths of the Silver Sea. But his gaze couldn't leave the devilishly handsome man who had been seemingly devouring so much of the Silver Sea at a rate that seemed tens of thousands of times more than them. The dazzling sea was visibly reducing at a
Entry
speed
raise
visible
front
to
to
the naked
back.
eye, as this entity was deemed the most dangerous by Martial Emperor Shi. And as he studied this being closely, within the passing nanoseconds, a group of omniversal pillagers led by one with the likeness of a two-legged draconic crow with blazing black wings began coming towards the direction of this being. Its visage was mighty and filled with ancientness, its draconic head burning with obsidian
life
flames
improvement.
as it made a beeline straight towards the devilish entity. Multicolored splendor wrapped around this two-legged draconic crow as it was on the same stage of power as Martial Emperor Shai above Terracosm. Such a being moved rapidly and came to appear in front of this devilish entity, and shockingly, the entity merely rose his
Say
head
it's
up
not
to meet
perfect.
such a massive
It worked for
omniversal
me.
pillager and its entourage, calmly as if he held no ounce of fear. No preparation,
Skulls.
no rush of authority, nothing. He only stared at the entity directly before him, as after the twisting and distortion of reality, the two-legged draconic crow actually didn't attack.
Putting these
Intent being
skulls on the front.
Our master sees that you are connected to the Sanctus Populi, Imperium, and even hold sway over some lesser omniversal pillagers. He wishes to meet you for a discussion over the course of recent events. The intent was picked up by Martial Emperor C as his eyes became ever sharper. The master of the omniversal pillagers? A discussion over the course of recent events? Martial Emperor Shi reported these words right
Bunch
away
of
across
junk.
the weavings of his enclave and Imperium, and he then thought about it deeply. Even the omniversal pillagers were affected by the cessation of weavings as their master. Their master sought a dialogue with the Sanctus Populi and Imperium. But this entity
More
did not
junk.
belong to the Imperium, so why would the master of the omniversal pillagers seek this devilish entity? This entity that Martial Emperor Shi did not know the distinction of, but he was the weaver of existence, and his eyes met the two-legged draconic crow and the omniversal pillagers behind it calmly as he spoke out with calmness. Your master knows where I am if he wishes to meet. Chapter 3096, Dialogue 2. It was within the time flow of nanoseconds. In these nanoseconds, the weaver of existence showed complete disregard for the authority of the entity behind the omniversal pillagers, uttering out words that even caused Asterius Virgo to gaze at him in shock. One must know, this was the master of the omniversal pillagers that the two-legged draconic crow was referring to.
Shrink it by 6.
The Eonic Eutera, known only by their shocking distinction and secrecy by a select few. Even the Imperium did not know too much about this being. Why had such an entity taken an interest in Noah at a time like this? As grand a question as this was, the even grander reality was Noah's response. His words were so calm and succinct that when heard, everyone was taken aback
Thing
for an
go
instant.
down here.
And within the span of a nanosecond thereafter, you, the power of an entity
Screen.
above the terracosm stage, spilled out as multicolored brilliance unfolded. Multicolored, the weavings of existence after the golden brilliance of terracosm. It was a stage known by no other name than the Paracosm realm, a realm taken by martial emperors and truly powerful elder queens, a realm that most renowned powerful entities across the omniverse spent all of their lives in. Most powerful entities, not all, but it was a stage of immeasurable power, as after one devoured enough fruits of existence or sufficient equivalent
hate the
resources
mouse.
for a great number of years in elevating their existential dominion, they would arrive at Paracosm. The word itself was unique, as it held many meanings, one of the more relevant ones being an imaginary world, an imaginary state of existence, a state of mind that affected how one thought, acted, and interacted with their surrounding reality. It veered more towards an
If we
imaginary
do
state
this
of
right,
existence,
there should be enough
and yet
space on both
entities at this
sides.
stage, what they imagined, did not remain imaginary. Their existential extremity authorities brought it to fruition. Even as Noah replied to this two-legged draconic crow before him at the Paracosm stage of the existential dominium realm, he knew that his current self wouldn't be able to topple or defeat it. But after the days spent in the
Close
desecrated
enough.
existential Chronos domain that was about to end soon, his weavings also told him he had no cause to run scared before this entity. His eyes twinkled as the authority of the weaver of existence and extremity bloomed, and an array of details appeared before his eyes as he looked at the flaming draconic crow before him. Even though their weavings are wrapped tightly by a veil of influence of lesser omniversal
Right in the
authorities
middle,
constantly,
maybe.
in the glow of a paracosm existential dominium, some details about this creature were still able to be discerned. With a heavy focus on power, this entity forged its existential dominium body to the absolute limit, finally becoming capable of tipping into the paracosm stage and forging an inner existential paracosm omniverse seed. Their existential body would never have its defenses pierced
Down
so long as
6,
its
maybe
inner
7
existential
at the
paracosm
most.
omniverse seed is preserved. And could one gain access to it if it is protected by an unconquerable body? Its power is Wah! Noah was unveiling records of this being. He was. But then his weavings buzzed and went haywire as another was inserted in right away. A clue for the rebirth of the lost greater omniversal authority of Theorkness has appeared. The death of a paracosm stage entity is
You got
merely an
2
impossibility,
rounds.
but if you manage to achieve it, they will leave behind an existential paracosm omniversal seed that can be utilized as the singularity to contain the complex weavings of an omniversal authority. He was only viewing the details of the two-legged draconic crow, and yet inadvertently, he gained information on how he could bring back the greater omniversal authority of Diorkness that only he held the records of in his quintessential Codex of Extremity. All that had to be done was to achieve
It
the
works a
impossible.
lot better in a full
To take
hab.
down a Paracosm stage entity when Noah had just gotten the surety of taking down average Terracosm stage entities seconds ago. As for how much his strength had risen in the desecrated existential Chronos domain, this question couldn't be answered so simply. The massive
Close enough.
existential body of the two-legged draconic crow pulsed as it felt like the influence of a dozen lesser omniversal authorities was instantly deployed and obeying its will, with the glow of a greater omniversal authority also coming down as in front of it. What existential extremity authority could oppose it? Common existential extremity authorities of even Terracosm stage may be bent and dissipated by such a pressure. Common authorities. What Noah had was in no way common. He spoke with shining eyes in the face of the Paracosm stage entity who wanted to express its power against him. It wasn't a
Teleporter.
true attack. It was merely a pressure to defeat one's will and bring them in line. But against such a thing, against an entity
jump.
whose inner existential paracosm omniversal
Yay,
seed could dream
space.
anything and bring it to reality, Noah called out his existential extremity authorities to wrap around him. Well, he called out his ascendant existential extremity authorities to weave around him. Woo! Multiple colors blazed around him as they bloomed out like crackling tendrils of lightning that danced madly. They were thick and massive, one simmering with a cerulean splendor, while another shone deeply gold, while another was a murky purple tendril of thick lightning, and another was colorless. Such thick coilings that looked like massive serpents of ascendant existential extremity authorities wrapped around Noah as his visage remained, undaunted against the pressure of a Paracosm stage entity before him. It was a scene that caused many pupils to dilate. Even the visage of Sona beside him opened her red lips in surprise, loosening her battle stance that seemed ready to go at any moment. All eyes were on Noah's vibrant show of authorities as everyone felt like they were existential extremity authorities, and yet they also felt foreign at the same time. What was this? Just what authority had this entity unveiled? Chapter 3097, Dialogue. An authority that many didn't recognize. Even the eyes of the massive two-legged draconic crow blazed with black flames as it seemed about to erupt with even grander fervor, especially as coilings of its Paracosm stage of authority was actually being rebuffed against the massive tendrils of serpentine-like authorities. And yet, in the next moment, its eyes glazed crimson. Its figure came to a stop. The authorities raging around it came to a stop, and in the next moment, interesting,
Works for me.
a guttural and utterly thick intent boomed out. It was not an intent belonging to the two-legged draconic, and yet it came out of the two-legged draconic crow.
Let's see.
Hearing this intent, the figures of little Calculatin and Asteria's Virgo behind Noah trembled. The other omniversal pillagers behind the two-legged draconic crow trembled, and subsequently bent their bodies with respect and obedience, with such a reality continuing to flow across the sacred natal omniversal sea of Pompeii in the far distance, where other groups of omniversal pillagers absorbing the silver waters all seemed to stop what they were doing and pay their respects right away to a singular intent, one they had only heard through the weavings of greater omniversal authorities every now and then, the intent of the great Ionic Terra. Sona's visage was tense as along with Noah's careful eyes, they both gazed at the visage of the two-legged draconic crow that had changed drastically in aura in just an instant. The eyes of the Paracosm stage entity had now taken a deeply crimson hue, the weavings of authorities fading from it, as these eyes came to lock onto Noah's visage, a calm and brutal intent leaking out slowly at this time. You hold the last traces of my Diorkness, and now you show this, what a unique one you are. The words were heavy ones, as Noah's eyes became sharp. His Diorkness? It couldn't be his. At most, maybe
Close
this
enough.
entity had nearly grasped the majority of the complex
Can you see
weavings of
it?
Diorkness, as Noah
Box
saw
in a way.
omniversal pillagers utilizing it before. But this greater omniversal authority should not have been theirs entirely. After this entity spoke such words, the head of the two-legged draconic crow turned up and gazed around before they continued. I experienced Diorkness being eaten up firsthand. I know the enemies that are causing the flies of the Sanctus Populi to tremble, and the oh-so-great Imperium to churn. I experienced Diorkness being eaten up firsthand. I know the enemies that are causing the flies of the Sanctus Populi to tremble, and the oh-so-great Imperium to churn. His words caused the figures of martial
Still
kings and the
this.
martial emperor of the Imperium to blaze
Same
with intent,
size.
but he paid no attention to them as his intent continued. This time the gaze of the two-legged draconic crow coming to lock onto Noah again fully. Come to me. Since you hold the full threads of Diorkness, it can be weaved again. Its resurrection will hold some clues against the worms that took it from me, as after that, we can cleanse everything and go back to the times of controlled, perilous destruction. A call towards Noah. A call towards the weaver of existence. There was much to unpack regarding what the intent of the Destro-y-her had just weaved out, but one of the major things that Noah stuck with was worms? The identity of the unknown enemies he couldn't even observe on the illusory screens of existential omniversal editor. The Destro-y-her had managed to merely glimpse at their figures, at least as Noah. He had only seen multiple destructive and horrific scenes in the last 3 seconds, or really, in the last 3 days within the desecrated existential Chronos domain. The scenes constantly shifted, but when they came to a stop, these unknown
Close
enemies,
enough.
these entities that the Destro-y-her had referred to as worms, would only cause utter and complete destruction. 2 other
I
Imperium
wonder.
outposts that were filled with Teleos and Sequor stage entities, and even the brilliance of a few Terracosm stage entities, and yet even they fell without a fight. 3 nests of omniversal pillagers, one led by a terrifying 5-winged turtle who had nearly grasped the multicolored brilliance of Paracosm. Noah saw how within a short period of time, an unseen force arrived in these locations, as moments thereafter, there was nothing else alive in those regions. Every ounce of existential extremity authorities was devoured, while any form of life was erased. And towards all of this, a possible answer may lie in the decimated greater omniversal authority of Diorkness. Noah's eyes blazed with ever grander waves of brilliance as he looked at the 2-legged draconic crow and the unfathomable entity currently taking over its body. He then remembered the new prophecy that the ascendant existential extremity clone of the protagonist had weaved out along with his support in the last 3 days within the desecrated existential Chronos domain, as this molded his answer towards this being. So when it came to the proposition of the Destro-y-her, I have a lot to do, as I won't be going to anyone. As for the greater omniversal authority of Diorkness, you must be mistaken. He denied the advances of the Destro-y-her, and all eyes watched with rapt attention as nobody knew what would happen next. But uniquely, the figure of the 2-legged draconic crow, bathed with obsidian flames and crimson eyes that were sharing the sight of another, only looked at Noah calmly in silence. And the will within it didn't utter another word, as after the passage of a few nanoseconds, it disappeared entirely. The eyes of the 2-legged draconic crow stared towards Noah again as if it had returned to its old self, its coldness only becoming denser as Noah
Hopefully
didn't
that
care
doesn't
for
go
it.
through the floor on the
The
top.
prophecy shed the path for him for the future to come. Trust and cooperation would not be given so easily, especially not so towards the omniversal pillagers. If the lost weavings of the greater omniversal authority of Diorkness truly held an answer as they were the first things these unknown enemies, these worms devoured, then Noah would bring back Diorkness himself and see just what clues it held. Chapter 3098. Dialogue. Before, as if it had received orders. The visage of the 2-legged draconic crow and the entourage of omniversal pillagers around it retreated from this location and went deeper into the sacred natal omniversal sea of Pompeii. An action that Noah looked at calmly as beside him, Sona's figure was even more stern as her voice echoed out. The cessation of weavings truly shook everyone up. The Imperium has declared an area where both their legions and the legions of the Sanctus Populi occupy as an existential Salvus domain. They will soon be having talks and sharing information on what enemy could be the cause of all this. An existential Salvus domain. It was basically an absolute zone that 2 sides agreed on, and this safe zone would never be violated. Noah nodded calmly, as even though it wasn't the weaving of reality that many expected, It was only natural after the lives of all of them were put on the line. Let's clear out this greater omniversal domain of Pompeii and move on from here first. By that time, any talk should be done, as the picture will be clearer. Do you still want to proceed with the initiative? The initiative.
Alright, I
It
like
was something
the
Sona was
blues.
spearheading as it was being built to combat the omniversal destroyer. Now it was known that an unknown source had sought to influence Noah to be the omniversal destroyer, as Sona
So
kept the
we're out of
forging of the
people.
initiative in order to combat this unknown source, or if they were to influence another entity to be the destroyer. But now, something even more drastic that was causing complete cessation of weavings arose as Sona massaged her forehead at such a dilemma as she thought of all the plans and weavings from before and where they stood at now. She looked towards little Caculatan, who was the third member of the
Some more
initiative,
stuff in
and
here
those who
later.
were planned to come next, thinking of the twins who had arrived within this same sacred natal omniversal sea of Pompeii near them, as her gaze became firm.
Wow.
I'll have another body of mine continue this as a contingency. For now, I'll follow your lead.
Multiplayer.
The grand initiative she had begun building and had foreseen for too many years. To let it go so easily wasn't something she could do, as she still wanted to follow the weavings of collecting anomalous entities to combat what was
Say
coming,
doors everywhere.
even if she had to do it on the side. Beside her, Noah nodded while gazing at the clearly sunk silver sea from his ridiculous absorption. All right, let's go! With an intentful glimmer, Noah's figure shot out towards the depths of the sacred natal
I need to put
omniversal
one
sea
in
of
here.
Pompeii. In the back of his mind, he was thinking of the tremendous progress made in the last 3 days in the desecrated existential Chronos domain. He was thinking of a new prophecy that had been unveiled by the protagonist within that period of time. In the midst of a war for existence itself, sabotage and subterfuge will unveil itself. From the hands of those born from
Let's
destruction,
see.
the horn of the end will only serve a single function. The wheel of existence churns and
This
churns
thing
again,
up here.
until the day an irreversible choice blooms for the sake of an existential gain. Endless weavings of ascension flow unfiltered across omniversal veins. And even this may not be enough to end an endless campaign. Yes, through the weavings of the
Made a
protagonist,
planet, bro.
Noah enacted another prophecy with the aid of greater omniversal authorities, and while the product was still grand, it also finished on a heavy tone. He steered it as best as he could
Mission
towards
radar.
brilliance, as he sought to understand more of what was coming in the future weavings. And yet the prophecy had still ended up expressing such a somber tone at the
Station
very end.
terminus.
But it did give him a glimpse of what was to come, as he didn't jump on the flow of the Aeonic Utera. In the midst of a war for existence itself,
The store.
sabotage and subterfuge will unveil itself. From the hands of those born from destruction, the horn of the end will only serve a single function. These words were crucial. It seemed
Only
like
one
under the
terminal.
threat of the cessation of all weavings,
That's a
multiple
mod.
groups were seeking to come together and put their differences aside to see how they could survive this. But even within these groups supposedly getting together, sabotage would bloom. Subterfuge would flow freely across the vast stretches of the omniverse. The oddities and wonders stretched out were
It'll
innumerable
give us a
to
little bit
count,
more
and
walking
the weavings of
space.
extremes in existence even more so, far away from any colonized and explored domains of the omniverse, masked within the weavings of existence and uncertainty, and held together by a distortion of space and time. There was a unique point of intersection
Did it
where the
disappear?
complex weavings of multiple greater omniversal authorities came together. At this intersection, immense waves
That's
of power
perfect.
flowed as at this moment, a slumbering will was roused after sensing certain changes from parameters it had set long before it had fallen into its slumber, akin to an ancient beast awakening, akin to an immeasurably powerful will coming to. The weavings of multiple
Perfect
greater
spacing.
omniversal authorities intersecting here were roused and burned with activity as... What? An intent of
Voice back.
incredulity echoed out from the waking will. It had planned for so many things all this time, as the weavings it was waking up to were so baffling that they had to pause.
Mission
The
terminal.
war that should have been unfolding, how is it that it has all but disappeared? The Imperium legions meeting the legions of the Sanctus Populi? Hume.
Can
The
you get
situation
window
was
there?
unprecedentedly different from how it should have been playing out. For its purpose, for its weavings, the Imperium had to accelerate conflict, the Sanctus Populi had to retaliate in kind, and in the middle of it all, the omniversal pillagers would continue their destruction and muddy the waters even more. They would all pick up the clues it had left behind and antagonize a single entity.
Let's see.
The finest piece of work with untapped potential it had seen as of yet. Its magnum opus that was just in the beginning stages. And yet, Chapter 3049, Dialogue 5. You were supposed to fight. You were supposed to antagonize him. Kill his family. Destroy his home. This, within the intersection of multiple omniversal authorities. An intent that had begun to bubble with rage echoed out as it read the current weavings of the omniverse, with its consciousness stretched out across multiple greater omniversal authorities. The plans it had spent so much of its authority on until it was forced to go back into a slumber
You know what?
seemed to be breaking right before it, and it didn't even know why. This was the
Better.
only designation and distinction that it could truly be given. It was not a being. It was not a will. It was a collection of weavings that had been oppressed and ground down for countless years by the Imperium. The maddening intent of an existential omniversal lineage flowed through it, as its very people were massacred and made slaves by the Imperium to farm resources eons ago. Its strongest forces were barely able to leave behind glimmers of their weavings through the greater omniversal authorities they were connected to. Barely. But even then, they could barely make any moves, as they had to remain within the boundaries of the greater omniversal authorities. And moves made came at a huge cost, as they had to be moves filled with surety of their purpose. To utterly decimate those that turned even the remnants of their omniversal lineage into seeds. The decimation of the Imperium. But this, what had happened? The weavings of an unknown source buzzed and attained waves of feedback from the greater omniversal authorities it was connected to. And moments after, space trembled. What is this? What is that? Words that were laced with incredulity. It was the words of something finding out about the
Close
weavings of
enough, you get the
terrifying
picture.
anomalies that were spreading out and devouring everything.
Go away.
Even the sources of greater omniversal authorities themselves. They were the reason why everything had shifted and became the way it currently was. And yet, the unknown source didn't find itself filled with wrath towards them. Its weavings calmed. It looked at the small bits of information it had received as its collective consciousness became increasingly bright, recalling some of the ancient weavings of history its people had glimpsed eons ago, long before even the Imperium came to be, of times old and grand, of times of tales and terrors about the omniverse that many of them dismissed as sheer fantasy. Within those immeasurably old times, they had learned stories about certain entities, certain things. When the collective will blazing in the intersection of the weavings of multiple greater omniversal authorities thought of this, its brilliance only became more intricate as its intent began to plan.
One more.
If it is them, then they should be capable of achieving my dream with ease. Its intent stated terrifying words, but it knew them to be true. Based on the weavings of the few traces of information it had discovered about what made the Imperium legions stop their warring, if those entities who somewhat fit the description of the horror stories it knew of from eons past, they truly wouldn't have any problems. But just in case those stories from the past were truly fantasies to make the citizens of the unified existential omniversal lineage of Lumen scared, it had to ensure that whatever these entities were would succeed in their purpose. Thus, it couldn't have the war come to an end. And when it thought about all the movable
That's
pieces,
not
its
straight.
gaze went towards the one it had influenced before. Weavings of this being arose as he had a lot of untapped potential, but it needed true rage to be directed and let loose. If it didn't have that, its potential was only being wasted. So the collective consciousness within the intersection of the greater omniversal authorities glanced elsewhere. A way to achieve the steps it had already laid out for this being to still be influenced to become a destroyer, and new weavings to break the forming alliances of monsters and those they used to hunt. New weavings to ensure that the factions of this omniverse do not begin to be united to stand against this common enemy. The Imperium must pay. The voice dripped with immeasurable pain and hatred as it spoke. Its collective consciousness was made up of many beings, as they all felt the same way. There was no dissonance. For all that they did, they have to receive the same retribution of destruction, no matter what.
Destruction.
There was no dissonance within the weavings of hatred, but they still understood full well what they were supporting here. To attain the destruction of the Imperium, they would go as far as to damn everything in the Omniverse if they had to. For scorching our omniversal lineage out of existence, for enslaving our brethren for eons. We curse you, O Imperium. We curse you. Wah! Their weavings moved across the omniversal authorities around the intersection and spread out. They went out towards the one group that could be ushered into chaos and utilized. One group that a single entity was controlling through omniversal authorities, the omniversal pillagers. Turn brazen and numb. Lose your minds in hatred and fervor. Imitate, kill, and do what can to ensure no unity. Give these unknown devourers the chance to destroy everything if they can, and if they really are from the fables of fantasy from eons past. Haha, then all of this is worthless, as even without lifting a finger, they will all be destroyed with surety. It could feel its madness within its endless wrath. It could feel it, but at this point, it didn't care. What was left of its weavings would not remain alive in consciousness for even another millennium. It had done the impossible to even survive this much, as with every push and pull of the omniversal authorities its weavings were connected to. It died a little bit more. Since death was predetermined for it and all of its omniversal lineage, then what harm was there in letting others follow this path? Revel in the coming destruction, twist and turn again, until the very wheel of existence is shattered. Sadness and melancholy flowed amidst the wrath and madness, but madness and wrath won out in the end. Chapter 3100, Fragile Alliances, 1. It almost felt like wheezing, like a laugh, and yet also the last dying breath of something that used to be so complex before. It was the power of the collection of consciousness within the intersection of multiple greater omniversal authorities constantly being drained out as it laid out its cards for the last time. It knew full well that after doing such a thing, the slumber it would fall into would be its final one. It wouldn't even be able to witness the product of its work. But it knew. It knew that it had to work, an immeasurably far distance away from the intersection of the weavings of greater universal authorities. Noah's figures and ascendant existential extremity clones were still in the desecrated existential chronos domain, even as the 3-day dilated time came to an end. Dumb! His heart continued to beat. Wah! And brilliance radiated on his body as the ascendant existential engine of cultivation continued to churn and further drive up his power. But there was a question of just how much his power had risen. How could such a thing be quantified? One could observe his Invictus Dominium wings at this moment and see an entirely potent hue of blazing gold, without a single purple light visible as around the wings on his feet and back, liquid gold flames constantly fell. Golden flames of glorious brilliance fell from his Invictus Dominium wings as they swirled below his feet like a circular platform of flames that followed him wherever he went. Some tendrils of these liquid gold flames would rotate around his figure, as his whole look was something too mesmerizing for others to even glimpse. This was his look. But it didn't express too much on just how different he was compared to himself from 3 days ago as to quantify this. Deep within himself, he felt weavings churn as his eyes became glazed gold. His existential Fidelis Dominium heart and his existential Invictus Dominium wings buzzed. And moments after, prompts arose before his eyes. Your false weavings were glanced upon and reviewed by a possible target of high priority. Your distinctions as the weaver of existence and extremity have risen from the stage of adult weaver and into the stage of elder weaver, as they can grasp an unfathomable number of things. Yes, after the constant beating of his heart every second, and being bathed with a light of strengthening each of these seconds for tens of thousands of times in the last day, everything about his existence was elevated. His existential dominion, his extremes, his omniversal organs, his lineage, and his distinctions. He had become an elder weaver of existence and extremity, and because of such a profound elevation in authority, he could see things that were not privy to him before. With a great reduction in its power and an overall elevation of power on your side, the weavings of the unknown source that sought to influence your path have been uncovered. The weavings of an unknown source, the thing that tried to steer Noah towards the weavings of an omniversal destroyer. Noah's eyes were sharp as he observed a massive illusory screen rise before his eyes, its contents buzzing briefly before they became pristinely clear. They became clear to show the scene of splendorous, multicolored brilliance, all culminating in massive tendrils of light that all converged together towards a single point. The weavings of a greater omniversal intersect have been uncovered. A region rarely found across the omniverse, but one that at this point in time has been uncovered to be some form of a doorway. It is a point where the weavings of multiple greater omniversal authorities converge, with the weavings of the unknown source having been inadvertently connected to this greater omniversal intersect for the last eons. A great deal of knowledge flooded into Noah as he watched the multicolored brilliance on the screen in front of him, that all came together to a point of a single blazing singularity. The authority of the Elder Weaver of Extremity shines brightly. The authority of the Elder Weaver of Existence burns with
I don't see
radiance.
anything.
The weavings of the unknown source that were not even able to be located before are currently being analyzed. Double F, how powerful had Noah become in the last 3 days? At this moment, some light was illuminated as Noah began to uncover the weavings of the terrifying source, even if they were far more weakened at this moment than they ever were before. It was done. Its grand mission was complete as something irreversible had been put into play, but the cost of it was far too high. What remained of its collective consciousness could not take it any longer. And such a thing only caused them to sigh in melancholy as they thought back to an immeasurably long time ago. Their existential omniversal lineage. How glorious it was in the past. How many innumerable existential domains they controlled. And yet now, it was all about to end, with nobody here to even witness it. I am here to observe it. The barely remaining weavings of the unknown source trembled as it thought it was hearing things in its throes of death. But no, its last remnants will spread out and checked. That was an intent. That was an intent from an unknown distance away, as somehow it had grown weak enough to the point that someone was able to arrive here, to even read the weavings of its emotions. But the unknown source didn't have to ponder too long before the same intent it had heard before. What did you do just now? What caused the accelerated deterioration of your existence to even allow me to find you? You. The collection of weavings thought of this word as it felt its radiance continue to dim. You were Noah Osmond. The one with, let's see, what did your weavings think of me? Oh, the one with untapped potential. Chapter 31:01, Fragile Alliances. The fading will of the unknown source buzzed in shock at such words.
Okay, let's put in the
It came to a
important
realization that
things.
this being hadn't just found its location. This being was actually breaking down its weavings and even retroactively going backward to unfurl weavings of its thoughts that had already occurred. This was Noah Osmond, the same one it had influenced towards becoming the omniversal destroyer, the same one with boundless untapped Poe, the one and the same. Even its weavings could be read smoothly and simply. How had this being managed to do this? The untapped potential, was it actually tapped into? Do not get distracted now. You don't have long. Yes, it didn't have long. Everything that it was and used to be was about to crumble into the vast weavings of the intersection of omniversal authorities. But this voice, this being, how could it reach here? In this space isolated from space and time and even existence itself. Only my voice could reach here before. But I've analyzed enough weavings of this area right now as crack! From the point of the intersect, the fading collection of consciousness raised its gaze and saw a crack open up in space. The crack was rectangular in nature, almost as if it were a screen of light as behind it, multicolored brilliance could be seen. At its center, a figure draped in a murky purple emperor's robe could be seen, bright golden wings on his back and feet that burned with golden flames that coalesced all around him. This being reached out from the other end of the rectangular screen and ripped it open from the very center, reality distorting as in the next moment, the film became malleable. His figure stepped out from it, and he arrived an immeasurably vast distance away, at a point very few ever knew the location of, and even few stumbled onto it. at the intersect of multiple greater omniversal authorities. At a greater omniversal intersect, the collective consciousness of what was left of a glorious existential omniversal lineage stared at the figure of a man it had sought to influence. Noah Osmond. For him to be here right now. Yes, yes. Surprising as it is, but everything about you is fading quickly, so we have to get a move on. Noah's figure drew closer and closer to the intersect, as the murky purple brilliance of entropy was so deep that it caused the surrounding calmness to teeter with even more chaos. His ascendant existential extremity clone of entropy, arriving right before the intersection of multiple greater omniversal authorities, as his golden wings on his back and feet surged with gold flames. As the weaver of existence, the very fabric of existence and reality could be discerned by him to simplicity. As the higher his authority and distinction were, the more secrets of existence he could uncover. As the weaver of extremity, the very weavings of concepts taken to the existential level were laid bare to him, with his capabilities to analyze them and break them down only increasing as this distinction became more powerful, and with him having the power to enact truly insane extremes on the with these two distinctions elevated to their current levels, his capabilities to analyze and understand had reached an unfathomable level, to the extent that he could read the weavings of what the weakened collective consciousness was thinking, even without it speaking. To the extent that if he stood in front of any entity at the Terracosm stage right now, he could freely know their intent and what lay within the depths of their wills. So at this moment, he was looking at collective consciousnesses that looked more like an amalgamation of hatred that was slowly dying out, tightly clutching the authority of greater omniversal authorities. As when looking at this thing, thousands of prompts flowed into Noah's mind. Prompts of pearls of information that he quickly organized, his intent leaking out. You are the remnants of the omniversal lineage that the Imperium toppled. What remains of the ancient line of the existential omniversal lineage of lineage. Noah could feel the collective consciousness shake ever so slightly. How did he know? Don't worry yourself with mysteries about me for now. As I said, you are about to fade away. So all of this was to resolve your hatred against the Imperium, as what did you choose to do? Noah's eyes burned brightly with golden flames. He felt like he could see through everything in front of him, as if he was breaking it all down piece by piece into weavings of information that he freely controlled. And at this point, as he uncovered many things, the silent intent of the collective consciousness within the intersection weaved out. We chose damnation for everyone else. We chose to do everything we could to ensure that the Imperium does not form any alliances with their old enemies, no matter how fragile these alliances may be. Keep them divided, keep them separate, so that these unknown devourers can keep erasing everything without fail. In its last breath, in its last few seconds, it uttered this out as the calling of an endless slumber drew nearer. Noah gazed into the intersect with coldness and apathy as his weavings echoed out. You enraged me a great deal before by trying to steer my path. It matters not what fate befall your lineage, Quintilian's fell. In its last throes, the voice seemed filled with indignation as it bellowed out. Our homes were burnt. Our lineage was scorched and diluted to nothing. Our reality was stripped from us and added to others. Anything that remained, they enslaved. This is what the Imperium did. They deserve death. They all deserve death. Why? It sounded like the wailing of a dying animal. It was nothing akin to the regality and wonder of an omniversal lineage. Noah looked at the intersect calmly while shaking his head. But you just made a decision to damn everything within this omniverse, not just them. The collection of consciousnesses went silent. Its remnant gaze went towards Noah before it croaked out. I made a move to keep everyone divided. But even this may have not been required, as if those unknown devourers are what I believe they are, then our only regret is that we will not witness the Imperium burnt to ashes. Its words were enough to scare others, but for Noah, who had been reading its weavings, his right hand reached out and plunged into the intersection of weavings of multiple greater omniversal authorities. His left hand showed the unfurling of a glorious codex of extremity. You seem to hold a great deal of knowledge, of eons of time even before the Imperium. Just how did you all manage to fall? What did the Omniverse used to look like then? Before you go on and perish, let me devour what little is left of you, O weavings of Lumen. His voice was of utter majesty, and his golden wings, dripping with flames, blazed like an eonic torch as he reached out and grasped something at the depths of the intersect. Chapter 31:02, Fragile Alliances. Lumen. It was a word closely related to light, as the existential omniversal lineage of Lumen was a race of beings made of pure light. Their blood flowed with waves of brilliance and majesty. Their physiology was one that was closely attuned to existence itself, as they were truly experts in traversing across the realms of existence. How did you all manage to fall? Noah's voice couldn't help but echo out as the last remnants of what used to be Lumen stared at him. At him who held behind the last of its remains in the weavings of the intersection ahead of him. He now breathed life into these weavings while devouring everything within their memories.
Oh, he's still operating.
It was a terrifying thing, as while he did so, the weavings of the greater omniversal authority of Asia are altering the flow of causality in this area. The first component of efficiency is burning with brilliance that further enhances the process you are carrying out. The weavings of the greater omniversal authority of Entropia are altering the flow of order and chaos in this area. A great deal of capabilities erupted with Noah at the helm, as of them resulted in a single thing. Droves of weavings from the existential, omniversal lineage of Lumen are being grasped by you. He was extracting and attaining something that was about to be lost entirely in the river of existence. So to his question, towards him asking how such a lineage that had been around for eons could have possibly fallen. What remained of the collective consciousness before utterly being ground down to nothing spoke calmly for the last time. Division and fracturing of our royals kept our power apart and easier for enemies to rise. The wars each faction carried out, the hunger for more resources. Once divided, we were broken and conquered over time. Just like you all, just like us. History will just repeat itself, Noah Ozma. Take whatever knowledge you can, and we would wish you the best of luck, but if those unknown devourers truly are what we think they may be, then all of you can simply say your goodbyes to this very omniverse right now. Even the knowledge of those things was what caused our existential omniversal Emperor of Lumen to fall and start a cascade of events. Lumen shone brightly for eons, Noah Ozma. Your light may not flicker for even a single year, much less a millennium. With such a glimmer of brilliance and last words, what remained of the collective consciousness shattered. It couldn't hold on any longer, as the unknown source that had sought to influence Noah to become the omniversal destroyer faded. Noah was silent at such a reality, as felt the continuing inflow of weavings. The infrastructure of the existential omniversal lineage of Lumen is being broken down and categorized. The hierarchy of the existential omniversal lineage of Lumen is being broken down and categorized. The qualities of the bloodline of the existential omniversal lineage of Lumen are being analyzed. The greater omniversal authority of Entropia blazes of brilliance, allowing a much greater influence to be taken from it as the transformation of the strongest qualities of the existential omniversal lineage of Lumen can be extracted and added to your existential omniversal Emperor lineage. In the death of the collective consciousness of the unknown source, Noah was making tremendous waves of gain. Gains that could add fundamental changes to himself and his people if he deemed them consequential enough to incorporate them. The weavings of the vessels, forging, farming, cooking, alchemy, and a myriad of other facets of the existential omniversal lineage of Lumen are being extracted. The flow of information was not a simple one. It was immeasurably dense, as before everything faded about the dead collection within the intersect. Noah devoured everything he could from it. Alongside these waves of information, there was also the meaning of this location he was in, as well as what the remnants of the omniversal lineage of Lumen had done. The location where multiple greater omniversal authorities converged was known as a greater omniversal intersect, a type of doorway. So where did it lead exactly? And as for what the remnants of the existential omniversal lineage of Lumen had done, Noah's head turned to a certain direction bathed with a multicolored light, as if he could already sense the chaos that was about to unfold from it. It was an overall negative for the Omniverse, but it was a positive for Noah. This was because it opened up avenues of possibilities. Possibilities that were about to unfold somewhere else as he had to be at that location. Protagonist. He called out. Towards the ascendant existential extremity clone of the protagonist within the infinite existential omniversal sea. Within the bounds of the Salvus domain set up between the Imperium and the Sanctus Populi. Verdant and golden brilliance of auroras encircled this whole area as more and more legions of both sides arrived, with the Elder Queen Mother of Life arriving beside the Elder Queen Mother of Dignity as opposite them. Another Paracosm Martial Emperor who looked like a teenager arrived beside Martial Empress Yelena. His gaze was cold and mighty, as if everything here was beneath him, even in this situation. He was only a glimmer of an existential omniversal doppelganger that was already following close behind, to eradicate those who had killed Raperial and Archon Basilius Alderon. One of the 81 pillars of the Imperium. A fraction of his power was here, this mere fraction expressing the heavy brilliance of Paracosm. The two sides were staring at each other when all of a sudden, the face of the Elder Queen Mother of Dignity lit up as she received weavings from none other than a girl she was greatly worried about. A certain Sanctus Princess, Sona, that had overheard the weavings that the will of the Ionic Utera was emanating in front of Noah. The unknown force behind the possible cessation of all weavings, their physiology is that of worms. This word spread around as the doppelganger of a certain pillar of the Imperium made his eyes sharp, while Martial Empress Yelena replied succinctly. Worms? Where did the boom? Her words didn't finish. In the periphery of the newly enacted Salvus domain, the influence of the greater omniversal authority of Cataclysmos rained down as the last move of the remnant will of the existential omniversal lineage of Lumen was initiated. Chapter 31:03 Fragile Alliances. Cataclysmos, a terrifying greater omniversal authority that destroyed everything in its path, and one that the top generals of the Ionic Utera utilized apart from Diorcus. The remnant will of the existential omniversal lineage of Lumen was restricted and weakened after all of these eons, but the last shred of their power was not something to underestimate. For their dying breath, they triggered unique means to remove the limiters of destruction certain entities had. They were already destructive. They always lived and thrived in destruction. The weavings of the collective consciousness simply enhanced this destructiveness while directing it in a certain direction. And so, boom, space above fractured as a heavy bombardment of greater omniversal authorities swarmed in, all of them directed towards the Imperial regions as the source of these attacks didn't reveal itself. Daring to violate the grace of the Imperium, of the Salvus domain, the bellow of the doppelganger of one of the pillars of the Imperium boomed out coldly as the harumph of the Elder Queen Mother of Dignity rang out calmly in reply. Such a vile authority does not stem from us, and you know it. The space above splintered open. The golden authority of Dignity shot out like an immeasurably fast sword as the space above became illuminated. And there, past the veils of authorities, the figures of tens of thousands of massive omniversal pillagers can be seen. At the forefront were three of the most terrifying ones of all. First and foremost being a nine-headed winged omniversal turtle. 9 heads shining with their own multicolored brilliance. A pair of massive wings blazing with poisonous verdant radiance. Each head swirled with multiple destructive existential extremity authorities and the influence of multiple lesser omniversal authorities. With the centermost head buzzing with the brilliance of the influence of 3 greater omniversal authorities, with Cataclysmos being at the very forefront. The moment that this beast alone was illuminated, the gazes of Martial Empress Yelena and the Elder Queen Mothers of Dignity and Life became somber. Even the Paracosm stage doppelganger of a certain renowned entity became stern. They knew of this turtle. It had come and gone in the past eons freely across the Omniverse, carrying out a tremendous death toll of entities and existential domains. The existential devouring Turtur, the 9-headed terror, the omniversal pillager of oblivion. Why had it appeared here? It always stood powerfully at the Paracosm stage since it first arose under the radar, and who knew how much more ridiculously powerful it was at this time. But it wasn't alone. Its blazing aura at the paracosm stage was heavy, but it was felt to its left and right as a tri-winged omniversal serpent floated with mad brilliance could be seen to its right. Obsidian scales
go look
reflecting
through
its
the back.
exterior as black lava-like substance circled around it. To the left of the existential devouring turtle, there was a massive existential carrion golem, whose body seemed like an amalgamation of humanoid terror, stones that seemed as heavy as planes of existence circling around it, as an unfathomable existential dominion body at the paracosm
There's
stage
nothing down there we
gloriously
really
made
need.
itself apparent. Three utterly horror-inducing omniversal pillagers at the paracosm stage, ones that far outstripped others at this realm. But behind them, there were hundreds of Terracosm stage omniversal pillagers and thousands at the Teleos stage, moving with interminable splendor. The eyes of the three Paracosm stage omniversal pillagers gazed down towards the legions of the Imperium, mainly as if they were their only targets. A heavy pressure descending on this whole region, as this became readily apparent. These terrifying omniversal pillagers were here for the Imperium forces. The legions of the Sanctus Populi saw this, and instinctively, they moved back. The move of the collective consciousness of the eradicated omniversal lineage
It's terrible.
was a deadly one. A fragile alliance was barely forming between two sides that had always been at war. And just before they could test the waters of moving together against a terrifying unknown enemy, such a fragile alliance was tested, where only one side was targeted by a heavy force. Would the
Let's
Sanctus
just
Populi
get
that
up
had
and
its
see.
legions massacred over the years truly move out of their own volition to aid the Imperium legions? Would the Imperium legions sit
There
still
he
when
is.
authorities blazed from the legions of Sanctus Populi and simply believed they were allies? It was a complex and simple move at the same time that cast doubt and began breaking down the beginnings of a fragile alliance before it ever solidified. Roar! The existential devouring turtle bellowed out as the greater omniversal authority of Cataclysmos vibrated with unfathomable power, beginning to gush down from above like an endless sea
Not
that
here.
was powered by its paracosm soul. Whatever horrors it was formulating within its existential paracosm, within its inner existential paracosm omniverse seed, they were all about to experience its full terror. The bellow from a stern martial Empress Yelena boomed at such a time as the Imperium Legion steadied. But at such a time, R.I.P. Space fizzled and tore as a rectangular screen of light bloomed at the very center of all of this, flashing very briefly before a hand tore through it and ruptured space, allowing two figures to appear in the next moment. The rift behind them closed just as quickly as it had appeared, as the two figures came under the scrutiny of all. Sister, you! From the legions of the Sanctus Populi, the shocked cry from Sanctus Princess Emiliana rang out with incredulity. It was followed by a simultaneous shout of recognition by a single word
You
from the
don't want to
Imperial
fall
Legion,
off.
coming from none other than Martial Empress Yelena, who recognized the figure of Sona from the weavings she had seen this whole time. Even more so, she turned towards the man beside her. Devilish handsomeness, golden wings of pure brilliance
Windows
that
in
dripped
the way.
with golden flames on his feet and back, golden robes that showed him emanating boundless majesty. Was this Noah Osmont, the one that had decimated Archon Basilius Alderon and Rapiriel? In her wonders and affirmations, the voice of the first representative of the Imperium to arrive here, his doppelganger at least, rang out in her mind.
Got him.
Do you know them? Are they our first intended targets? The tone was heavy and domineering as it sought an answer, but before this answer could be given, "Pull back, Sona!"
Budding
The
reality.
roar of the Elder Queen Mother of Dignity boomed towards Sona, who had appeared directly in the line of fire, the weavings of heavy authorities from the omniversal pillagers about to arrive before them as the golden flash of dignity moved out instinctively. Along with
is
it,
the
the
seed
legions of the Sanctus
of
Populi
the
under her control moved. On the other
fauna.
side, Martial Empress Yelena grit her teeth
At the
as she
top.
pointed forward commandingly. Advance! Part of the legions of the Sanctus Populi and the Imperium moved simultaneously. All it took was the appearance of a single man and woman. Noah's ascendant, existential extremity clone of the protagonist, gazed over the terrifying armies around him, as the reality of appearing and beginning to alter the very weavings of reality only made his distinction more profound. But his purpose for appearing here right now was a simple
Easy.
one. He gazed up. Towards the terrifying paracosm stage entities he would not be able to kill yet after only undergoing 3 days of grueling cultivation. Especially ones that were this powerful. The last move made by the remnants of the existential omniversal lineage of Lumen. He would accept this move gladly and not put it to waste, as his goal here was, against all possible challenges, he had to kill a paracosm stage entity and attain its inner existential paracosm omniverse seed. Chapter 3104. What is paracosm? 1. Paracosm. An immeasurably detailed imaginary reality that, when paired up with existential extremity authorities, allowed for unfathomable possibilities to bloom outwardly. Above, the existential devouring Tercher gazed down coldly as its inner existential paracosm omniverse seed spun with glory. The weavings of the greater omniversal authority of Cataclysmos took the forefront as it missed the wonders of the Orkness that were taken away. But Cataclysmos was even more terrifying. Its weavings imagined something within its inner domain. And multicolored brilliance shone over its 9 heads and brilliant wings as its intent echoed out. 9 hells of Cataclysm. Within the span of an instant, millions of obsidian spiked pillars radiated penetrative power bloomed, with chains weaving across all of them as they blanketed the space above the Imperium legions like another sky. The pillars and chains formed into countless halls and rooms of torment and destruction, their influence blanketing downwards as they imposed whatever reality the paracosm stage entity above envisioned onto those below. The thoughts of an extremely powerful entity are being imposed on the surrounding omniverse. The 9 hells of Cataclysmos have descended as within them, and in all close proximity of 1 million light years, enemy targets face a constant barrage of 10,000 existential extremity authorities stemming from Cataclysmos. This reality is deemed to norm, as if any target resists this, they will be further focused on as the barrage of 100,000 existential extremity authorities stemming from Cataclysmos will descend unto them. Any targets not blessed by the mark of Cataclysmos will not be able to move or circulate 99% of their authority. Those designated as part of the Imperium legions will be assaulted by constant chains of Cataclysmos, their very dominiums set to be skewered and burned for at least a full second before they can be granted death. The probability of retaliating against the weavings of the 9 hells of Cataclysmos is reduced by 70%. If any other weaving tries to impose itself against the 9 hells of Cataclysmos, the cost of doing so is increased 10 times more than normal. If the targets within the 9 hells of Cataclysmos reach less than 30% of their overall existential vitality, causality will be twisted, as they will instantly have their dominiums claimed to fuel further propagation of the 9 hells of Cataclysmos.
This might be the deepest spot.
Noah interpreted most of what imaginary reality this entity at the paracosm stage thought of,
It's
and
robots
then
and snow.
proceeded to make it into a true reality all
Fish.
around him. This was the weaving of the existential devouring Tercher, what its inner existential paracosm omniverse seed laid out in its effects. Trying to negate it, another paracosm with an equal or much greater weight was required, or some other unique exceptions and oddities could possibly counter such
Find
terrifying
more
capability.
land.
The question was, would such oddities so easily come to fruition? Like a golden flash of light, the elder Queen Mother of Dignity was the first to appear beside Sona, glancing at this young girl who held 2 icy gold
Shoulda
swords in
did
her
that.
hand, while pointing them towards the weavings of a paracosm stage entity, as if she could actually stand against it. She had seen her grow up as she watched her since the day she almost took the source of dignity from her, and she would never sit back while her existence was ground to nothing. Multicolored brilliance flourished. She was also a paracosm stage expert, as she could impose her own rulings to affect the surrounding omniverse. Unbreakable dignity. Unbreakable. Her dream was a unique one. Her vision in paracosm was one filled with resplendence, as with her at the center and covering Sona and Noah, a blooming of golden lotuses covered every gaze as they came with their own ideas of the surrounding omniverse. Any authority designated as antagonistic cannot pass through the lotuses of dignity of the surroundings. Any authority designated as antagonistic will be measured on a scale of
Snail
dignity.
shell.
If its dignity is deemed less, this authority will be devoured to empower the proliferation of even more lotuses of dignity. Any authority stemming from one designated as an ally
Jeez.
will gain the support of a lotus of dignity below them, granting them the influence of the greater omniversal authority of Prestige with every attack they unleash. Any authority, these prompts rose before Noah's eyes as another entity threw out their own idealized form of what the omniverse around them would be. The figure of Martial Empress Yelena was right behind the elder Queen Mother of Dignity as she raised a dazzling,
There you go.
transparent codex of extremity. Its pages unfurled with brilliance as her unblemished voice bloomed. Bastion of Monarchos! The golden light of the greater omniversal authority of Monarchos shot out from below and flowed across the codex of extremity in her hands, her own paracosm stage powering up this light as it was covered with dense regality.
4 out of 4.
Monarchos, a terrifying greater omniversal authority that closely related to royalty. To those with regality and majesty, under the banner of the martial Empress Yelena, all those designated as royalty will be granted the protection of 100,000 existential
heads.
extremity authorities within the weavings of the greater omniversal authority of Monarchos. Any authority inventing to stand against royalty will face the constant barrage of 10,000 existential extremity authorities within the weavings of the greater omniversal authority of Monarchos.
Check this one out real
Utter
quick.
brilliance unfurled all around. Noah observed all of these alterations of the surrounding omniverse itself due to the paracosms of others, due to the imaginations of others. And his ascendant existential extremity clone of the protagonist calmly placed his hands
Ouch.
behind his back as he weaved out a single authority. The ascendant existential extremity of the protagonist is being put to the test. Golden flames of brilliance raged around him as his Invictus Dominion wings flashed. A distinction of the protagonist has been actualized and brought forward to be tested. A protagonist always overcomes and breaks through the obstacles on his path, either undergoing a false death and undergoing a rebirth, or simply becoming stronger during the challenge. The ascendant existential extremity authority of the protagonist puts this distinction to the test against the weavings
That's
of a
the problem.
paracosm stage existential dominium realm enemy. Chapter 3105, What is Paracosm? The ascendant
the other one.
existential extremity clone of the protagonist was putting himself to the test. What his concept truly stood for. Whenever a protagonist of a fable was knocked down, they somehow always stood up. The very will of reality seemed to be aligned with them, and their being as they would never perish. With this meaning the end of the story, they would at most undergo a false death and come back stronger than ever. There were even those who made breakthroughs during battle and grew strong enough to overcome it, or other tools that made up the protagonist came into play. Other tools. When it came to this, the eyes of Noah's ascendant existential extremity clone of the protagonist became sharp as it shot out from its position towards the engulfing obsidian crimson 9 hells of Cataclysmos. The protagonist is pulling on the tools under its banner to unleash its true brilliance, the tools that were expanded by it and should be under its control. A defiant weaving boomed out that caused many of Noah's extremes to buzz. Didn't that mean the protagonist calls upon plot? The protagonist calls upon ascension. The protagonist calls upon cheats. The concepts it enacted and brought towards extremity. It actually called upon some of them right now to be under its banner, even though it knew some were far too independent. The weavings of plot flow smoothly across the protagonist. After a slight hesitation,
Yes.
the weavings of ascension flow smoothly across the protagonist. 2 of the 3 that were called upon let their weavings flow freely. But the last one,
Small
particularly
Corvette.
independent
Easy
one with
peasy.
its own distinct personality. Would it truly allow itself to come under the banner and control of the ascendant existential extremity authority of the protagonist? Cheats smiles at the need for control of the protagonist. Cheats freely allows its weavings to flow across the protagonist. An unexpected reaction bloomed as the expected defiance from Cheats didn't show. Instead, this weaving allowed its authority to flow across the ascendant existential extremity clone of the protagonist as in the next moment. The ascendant existential protagonist aura exploded. Boom! His wings flared. Around his body, multicolored brilliance unfurled with indomitable scrutiny.
What is this?
Dum dum dum! Dum dum dum! A heavy beat began. A beat as if the main character had arrived and things were about to get serious. It was followed by a heavy symphony of drums and guitars that caused the weavings of existential extremity authorities and lesser omniversal authorities to vibrate with instability. Wheels began to buzz to localize exactly where this symphony was coming from. At such a time, the three-way power clash between the existential devouring Turtur, the Elder Queen Mother of Dignity, and Martial Empress Yelena occurred. Boom! It was as if multiple realities were trying to overlap with each other. The 9 hells of Cataclysmos were vast and unquenching as they covered an extremely wide area, smashing into both the unbreakable dignity and bastion of Monarchos at the same time as its obsidian crimson pillars and chains crushed the lotuses of dignity, and the crowns and thrones of royalty rising from Martial Empress Yelena. When the thoughts of multiple paracosm stage entities clashed and sought to establish dominion, the stronger one would express its effects while weakening all others. At this time, it was made clear what was weak and what was strong. Crack! The pillars and chains of the 9 hells of Cataclysmos were intricately connected together as the weight of one seemingly carried the weight of all others. It crushed apart many of the rising lotuses and thrones of regality, trying to put its descent as it continued. And to make matters worse, Serpentine Apocalypto, the tri-winged omniversal serpent beside the existential devouring Turtur, spoke out as obsidian brilliance exploded out, Stygian carrion swamp. The existential carrion golem, also beside the existential devouring Turtur, erupted with its own weaving into the paracosm stage. Yes, the Turtur wasn't alone. Even as they barely gained a brief instant of respite, 2 more omniverse-altering attacks descended, as the gazes of Martial Empress Yelena and the Elder Queen Mother of Dignity was somber, their figures burning with even more authority to rebuff the oncoming undeniable authority. Sona! The Queen Mother bellowed out as she saw the chains and pillars of the 9 hells of Cataclysmos were directly above Sona and Noah. She was powerful, yes, but she could stand against a paracosm stage entity. Her pupils dilated. She saw the man beside her fly out as his hand reached to the unfathomably powerful chains crashing down, and in the next moment, bzzzt, the unstoppable chains that even crushed countless lotuses of dignity buzzed
driving too
from their
fast.
original descent. Around the visage of Noah and Sona right below him, obsidian flames instantly surged as they seemed to resonate with the descending 9 hells of Cataclysmos. As for why, the ascendant existential protagonist, Aura, has triggered a complex weaving of plot to ensure your livelihood. Your distinctions seem to be in line with it, as instantly, you have gained the recognition of the greater omniversal authority of Cataclysmos. The recognition just so happened to change your distinction as a target of the 9 hells of Cataclysmos. A maddening reality bloomed. A reality where an ascendant existential extremity authority began to express itself, truly. Your fable is not one that can be extinguished so easily. Plot armor begins to burn around you, and seek for any solutions to help you achieve what you want in your favor. Cheats burns with brilliance and sees a possibility from the countless weavings of the existential omniversal lineage of Lumen recently obtained.
We gonna stop right here.
Cheats triggers an existential Deus Ex Machina, calling upon the weavings of the last standing guardian of Lumen piety. Things began to turn up a whole octave. Above Noah's ascendant existential extremity, clone of the protagonist, the 9 hells of Cataclysmos were torn apart as a crimson rift with blazing crimson radiance instantly tore this region of the Omniverse open. Chapter 3106, The Indomitable Protagonist. 1. Battles of the entities at the Paracosm stage were high-paced as they analyzed and reacted to all changes rapidly. Some changes were within their expectations and grasp as they altered their attacks a little, while other changes didn't even deserve any alterations. Then there was what occurred at this moment. As all 3 Paracosm stage omniversal pillagers fully delved into battle with the Elder Queen Mother of Dignity and Martial Empress Yelena retaliating, and the Elder Queen Mother of Life appearing at this moment, as with her as the center, an illusory verdant tree that covered all the legions of Sanctus Populi bloom. Green and sparkling with stellar seas of light. Its paracosm was a
Let's
symbol
move a little
of the
bit.
Tree of Life. Under the shade of the Tree of Life, you cannot die. A single paracosm, a single ideal turned into reality. It was unfathomably powerful as this single truth covered all those from the Sanctus Populi, including Noah. And this was the exact time that the weavings of the protagonist, spearheaded by Noah, did trigger something even he didn't know the full result of. An existential deus ex machina that was geared towards helping him achieve his aims. The last guardian of Lumen, Piety, was being reconstructed based on the weavings of its past existence. From the massive crimson flaming rite radiating stupendous light, hands bathed in crimson gold light and flames stretched this rift open ever further as in a blink. Shah! These hands pulled and squeezed out a massive entity.
Ouch.
The rift, as if it never should have been
Didn't
opened,
see that.
closed up extremely quickly, as an entity bathed in crimson gold flames appeared in the center of the 9 hells of Cataclysmos. An expanse of wings of light behind it, a burly humanoid body that suddenly manifested a long crimson spear and a golden shield that at its very center had the branding of an eye. An eye whose pupil held within it the scripture of Lumen, light. A record of an entity eons past was brought out to fruition due to the weavings of the protagonist. Under the effects of the protagonist, the existential extremity authority of summoning has come to fruition. An unbreakable existential bond has formed between you and the temporarily summoned last guardian of Lumen, Piety. The directive of the Piety is a clear one. Whom crimson gold flames unfolded. The visage of the entity named Piety was fully armored in a white gold armament, its face entirely covered with a helm made of pure light, as even its eyes couldn't be seen. But uniquely, one couldn't sense the familiar aura of existential dominion on it. With your current realm, the summoned record of Piety is closely equivalent to an entry-level paracosm stage entity. Equivalent.
You know what?
But the words didn't say it stood at the paracosm stage of the existential dominion realm. What did this mean? Zing! The spear of Piety let out a dazzling noise as it began to move, its sharp points slashing and weaving all around it at an immeasurably fast pace that didn't fit its body. And in the next instant, pah! Like glass shattering, the intricate weavings of the pillars and chains of the 9 hells of Cataclysmos were torn and burnt in pure light. A light that once it faded, only the brilliance of the armored last guardian of Lumen Piety remained. Its spear didn't move with any influence of greater omniversal authorities. There wasn't an overabundance of thousands or tens of thousands of existential extremity authorities around him. There was only light, Lumen. The realms of the existential omniversal lineage of Lumen were starkly different in their progression as they contained everything within their lineage Lumen. All possible weavings they grasped were fully weaved into Lumen. All complexities of weavings of tens or thousands of existential extremity authorities were all contained within Lumen. When a true champion of Lumen moved, pure light scattered, and the unfathomable brilliance of Lumen
Need more
spread.
windows.
Their realms of power were all based on light. The last guardian of Lumen, Piety, stood powerfully at the omnivo, 8 existential realm of Lumen before he fell. Boom! Its presence was made
Right
clear.
at the edge.
The protagonist had brought it forth with Deus Ex Machina, as its first action was to destroy the terrifying 9 hells of Cataclysmos, its massive, illusory figure disappearing soon after, as it instantly arrived before the 9 heads of the existential devouring Turtle. It seemed like absolutely pure light was cascading across the battlefield as the spear of Piety swung down, the rightmost head of the existential devouring Turtle moving back speedily as it roared and raged. And even then, obsidian blood gushed out as nearly half the head of the existential devouring Turtle was severed. The light contained within the speedy moving spear seemed to break and deteriorate the weavings of tens of thousands of existential extremity authorities, protecting the existential devouring Turtle constantly. Its brilliance continuing even as millions of obsidian chains bloomed in front of it.
Okay, let's go.
It was so astounding that an instant later, the massive shield in the left hand of Piety glowed, a binding light released from it that flowed rapidly to shine on the whole figure of the existential devouring Turtle, all of its countless layers of protection becoming erased by this flash of light as a sharp and concise spear swung down. And 5 of the 9 heads of the massive terror of an omniversal pillager gushed with blood as they were cleaved cleanly off. Wah! It was a shocking scene, one that threw the battle off its rhythm as if this continued. The duration of the summoning of the last guardian of Lumen Piety is coming to an end. A great power
Somebody
like this
else?
could not be brought out and kept out so easily, or so it should be this way. But at such a moment, Noah's figure watching all of this from below brightened as Lumen. A sharp shout of disbelief rang out across the battlefield from a certain doppelganger, from a representative of the Imperium. And the moment this shout rang out, the massive illusory figure of Piety that could stop began to buzz. The record of Piety senses something deeply ingrained within its existence,
Okay, sir.
a trace of a signature of a lineage from eons past. An existential obsession is being born within Piety. The weavings of the last guardian of Lumen Piety should have burned brightly for a single second before disappearing. The fortune and luck of the protagonist were triggered as Piety sensed the trace lineage of the ones that burnt the lands of Lumen eons ago, its cognition further awakening as it begins to pull on the surrounding authority to anchor itself onto the present weavings. Chapter 3107.
He slides right in the way.
The indomitable protagonist. Sick, all the tools of the protagonist were fully at work. Sudden bursts of fortune, luck, plot armor, deus ex machina, everything was erupting all at once around the ascendant existential extremity clone of the protagonist, as it all applied a corrective effect to ensure the future he was looking for occurred. As of right now, even the causality of death could not be utilized as everything was still up in the air. Probability had not yet entirely twisted towards his favor, but if the tools of the protagonist continued to unfold as the terrifying reality of the last guardian of Lumen was currently unfolding, boom! The illusory figure of the last guardian of Lumen burned with a white cold light as its haziness began to gain
Storms.
the existential obsession born within Piety seeks any possibilities to fully anchor itself in the current weavings of reality. Boom! The figure of Piety buzzed. It wanted an anchor, something to keep it here, so its existence filled with brilliance once more turned to movement. But this light was bright, but it was of eons past. It existed back then, not now. Piety could not see a way to use Lumen as an anchor, even as the idea that even in this current weaving of reality, there was always light.
Where is the
The
grass?
lumen with it was already dispersing and falling back into the depths. It needed a jumpstart to close the moment. It needed a true anchor. So in its last moments, Piety searched. Piety traced. He traced back the only source that was bound to it, the one that currently listened to the commands of it. In the span of an instant, Noah felt blazing eyes of light stare at him. He stared back calmly. The last guardian of Lumen pleads to your existence and asks if there is anything capable of being utilized as an existential omniversal anchor. Why? It was a long shot. As wondrous as it was that Piety was brought here, it could see the entity controlling the last weavings of its source had not even formed his paracosm. How could he have anything that could possibly act as an existential omniversal anchor? Boom! Piety could feel a somber sigh of regret at not even being able to embark on its obsession as it felt its existence slipping away once more. But not before. The protagonist reaches out to the weavings of Piety. The protagonist provides a possible existential omniversal anchor for the last guardian of Lumen. What? Was it actually possible? Even with doubt swirling in its mind, Piety reached out and accepted this possible anchor. Of course, it didn't come without a cost. Piety crosses the irreversible bridge of existence and the absolute bindings of the protagonist. Piety traversed a far distance and became even further bound into Noah's existence. And at the end of it all, the weavings of Piety are being connected to an immeasurably vast resource as an anchor to its existence. The weavings of Piety are being bound to the mana of the protagonist. An utterly gorgeous cerulean hue flashed within the white gold luminescence of Piety. Piety didn't even get a chance to doubt
Can't see
and question
anything.
a single aspect of one's existence could possibly be used as an anchor. Because the moment it was connected, boom, its illusory brilliance instantly became solid. That was how potent the anchor had become bound to was. An unfathomable action. Something that cannot easily be done, even with the complex weavings of greater omniversal abilities. The weavings of an existence entirely lost and eradicated across all records have been brought back through a trace of memories from a remnant collective consciousness. The entity that is the last guardian of Lumen piety has jumped across eons of history to eradication itself to appear in the currently unfolding reality. The existential extremity authority of summoning has attained the ascendant distinction. The first ascendant existential summon piety has come to fruition. Immeasurably stable, omniversal authorities exceeding the greater distinctions gaze at your actions. An array of results. This was how powerful and ridiculous an action Noah
He
had
just
taken.
took.
This was how indomitable the
Thank
protagonist
you,
was
sir.
as he caused such a nonsensical thing to happen at this moment. And the first, but indubitably not the last product, was the last guardian of Lumen, piety. The first ascendant existential summon, piety. His massive armored body solidified as his spear and shield became white gold pure light, a hint of blue leaking from it as it bodaciously turned its back on the roaring Turtur who had multiple heads cut off. It turned and gazed down towards the legions of the Imperium, more so towards the doppelganger of a shocking personage, as from him, piety could even more closely sense threads of the lineage that burnt everything it knew. And oh! The spear of light wielded by piety began to buzz as if calling for blood, but at such a time, Noah's voice echoed out. Not yet. Not now.
Alright, we just need the
A voice
bird.
that buzzed within piety's very core.
In the
A
morning.
voice that Piri didn't question, believing it at this moment as
And
it
the
staved
sun's
off
about
its
to get-
existential obsession. Momentarily. For now. Because what the owner of the existential omniversal
the
engine
ship.
was commanding it to currently do was to achieve his dream for today. Whoa! The spear of light in the hands of piety buzzed and stabbed upwards trillions of times in an instant. And right after, the dark space of the omniverse became
see
lit up
any
with
there.
trillions of white suns of light. Light so blinding as if announcing the resurgence of something heavy. Something that should have never been lost. Roar! The beheaded visage of the Turtur bellowed out as its 5 heads reattached themselves with waves of obsidian darkness. Its paracosm raging angrily as the tri-winged omniversal serpent and carrion golem beside it all turned their focus on piety. What this entity expressed was sheer power. What piety stood for on this battlefield was something else entirely. When the word lumen was uttered, the vast majority of the Imperium legions froze in shock. The Sanctus Populi didn't show any less shock. This was how terrifying the lineage that Lumen was. With the power of the
Comes
last
the
guardian
sun.
of Lumen being expressed just now, one had to question how a lineage that had entities like this felt. All extremes they knew were rude to their limit. They never expressed anything but Lumen, as this alone allowed them to dominate.
Go
So how did the
to the
Imperium
top
topple?
of the little hill.
The answer lay in their weakness, and the answer was a particularly deadly one. No one knew this. Piety knew this. After all, it was the base of its obsession, so its massive armored body pulsed as its spear pointed towards the omniversal pillager legion spearheaded by the existential devouring turtle.
And wait for the bird.
The master wishes. The master? What master? Such questions only barely arose as right after, trillions of white gold suns of pure light cascaded down like drops of rain. Chapter 3108. The Indomitable Protagonist. 3. An advent of something that threw off the balance of the whole
Scans.
battlefield. On the shield of a certain newly appearing entity, the Ecritor of Lumen shone brightly as such an entity had voiced out the word master. Just what could be the master of a combatant of a lineage lost throughout history? Wah! There was no answer. Only the descent of trillions of white gold suns that
Nothing.
made it seem like in this region of the Omniverse, there was a white gold downpour of stellar rain. Roar! The paracosm stage omniversal pillagers bellowed out as at the forefront, the existential devouring turtle fully annealing its heads as obsidian serpentine tendrils of cataclysmos began to cover everything around it. The 2 paracosm stage omniversal pillagers beside it seemed to resonate with it and layer on their power, feeling the threat of this newly appearing creature as they had to eradicate it first. These thoughts were buzzing within their minds, but there was another group that was shockingly forced to have similar thoughts
There it
simply
is.
based on their designation. The Imperium legions and the commanders at their forefront felt a sense of somberness and trepidation at the distinction of Lumen, a lineage they had decimated far too long ago and cleansed everything about it. The face of Martial Empress Yelena was ashen as she looked above at the visage of piety, the figure of the representative pillar doppelganger appearing beside her with immeasurably cold eyes, as his voice seemed to echo out with a sense of unwillingness.
Is it a cave?
Secure the perimeter across a billion light years around us. Others are coming. Even a glimpse of Lumen had to be investigated and contained, even at the cost of many lives. The words were cold as Martial Empress Yelena could not help but feel a sense of rising dread.
Okay.
Her intent was whispered out in the lowest possible tone as she replied. But the cessation of weaving, the unknown devouring worms we've just uncovered the identity of. The cessation of weavings won't matter if any trace of Lumen is before us. There will be cessation with their very return that will be even more painful. Follow every fucking order without question at this moment. We are in an extremely precarious position. None of you from the current generation know the terror of Lumen, and you do not want to know it. The words were inviolable ones, as Yelena grit her teeth while waving her hand, sending out commands for the Imperium legions to spread out and cover this whole perimeter. The somber voice of the man beside her continued in the midst of such a development. Our main purpose right now is support and observation until the major force of the Imperium arrives, and the identity of the one this peon of Lumen called Master. It was a rapidly deteriorating situation, and they had to move fast. As for the Master of the last Guardian of Lumen, they were all looking for, causality has still not tipped in the favor of the protagonist. He was reading an increasing number of prompts as the ascendant existential extremity clone of the protagonist continued to seek a profound expression of its power. Under the banner of the main character, there is always strength in numbers, where they do not have to do everything themselves. The most effective main characters are those who can sit back and command the weavings of events with mere words, and ultimately achieve his aim. The ascendant existential extremity clone of the protagonist seeks to work smarter, not harder. The weavings of Cheat's nod in affirmation and state that there is immense potential in the uncovered weavings. Increased analysis of the knowledge from the remnant collective consciousness of Lumen and the connection with the last guardian of Lumen has allowed for more excavations of the records of Lumen. But unlike the last guardian of Lumen, all other records are too scattered to be brought back as they are. Supplemental weavings of existence are required to bring forth any other records of Lumen. His pure gold flaming wings radiated even more splendorous flames, even as beside Sona, the figure of the Elder Queen Mother of Dignity appeared protectively and began talking. Bot Noah's focus was fully on the weavings of the protagonist and the other ascendant existential extremity authorities currently flowing through it. The ascendant existential extremity authority of summoning blaring forth at this moment. The counterparts to complete the scattered weavings of Lumen have been ascertained. The moment this prompt arrived, it was as if the weavings of the protagonist had gotten a pass to do whatever
We'll
they
get
wanted.
there.
Deus Ex Machina has been triggered once more. The records of the commander of the 77th Battalion of Lumen are being brought across the weavings of existence itself. They pulse with instability, as unless something supports and completes their scattered weavings, their weavings will dissipate. The prompt came, and the ascendant existential extremity authority of summoning moved. The summoned blue slime has been brought forth to complete the commander of the 77th Battalion of Lumen and act as part of the anchor of its existence. Brilliance flourished, and soon after, the visage of a bouncing blue slime pulsing with excitement appeared, looking around with sparkling eyes as an instant later, a rift opened above it as white gold light bloomed out and landed on the blue slime. Within this light, the figure of a winged humanoid creature could barely be seen before its form sublimated into the blue slime. The commander of the 77th Battalion of Lumen has successfully been stabilized by the existence of the blue slime. To maintain its weavings, an unbreakable bond has been formed with the protagonist as mana is utilized as its existential omniversal anchor. The form congealed and became clear. Simmering with radiance, the eyes of the blue slime protruded behind a circular white gold armament that blazed with an aurora of white gold wings behind it. Its eyes held the same playfulness, but one could distinctly feel an ancient will rising behind them and gazing around at everything. Standing at Omnivo, 7 existential realm of Lumen, the blue slime of Lumen bubble has been successfully retrieved from eons of lost records. The second ascendant existential summon bubbles has come to fruition. Chapter 3109, the indomitable protagonist, before. A second blinding white gold lumen erupted after the last guardian of Lumen, this one looking like a ball of light with wings. Its aura wasn't as sharp as it stood at Omnivo, 7 existential realm of Lumen, compared to Omnivo, 8 existential realm of Lumen piety. But its appearance was grand and brave at the same time. The expression on Martial Empress Yelena became ashen, while the representative beside her had his fists trembling, his expression immeasurably somber at this moment. A single entity of Lumen was a problem. 2 was a catastrophe. It wasn't in terms of power. It was all in terms of what it represented. A second entity of Lumen meant they were inexplicably experiencing the resurgence of this existential omniversal. Ha! Their thoughts only heard the yell of the second entity of Lumen as if it were a thunderclap. An instant later, the white gold wings of the blue slime of Lumen bubbles flashed and it disappeared. It only reappeared opposite the 3 paracosm stage omniversal pillagers currently facing piety, and a rain of white gold suns as their own weavings of realities were constantly born and destroyed. Bubbles appeared on top and began to bounce on the armored head of piety, the front of its round armor opening to show a small mouth that began to act akin to an endlessly devouring singularity at this moment. The complex weaving of Cataclysmos and any other omniversal authorities emanating from the omniversal pillagers began to be sucked towards the small mouth of Bubbles uncontrollably as the battlefield was further disrupted. But goodness, this was just the beginning. Causality has still not tipped in the favor of the protagonist. Deus Ex Machina has been triggered once more. Deus Ex Machina has been triggered once more. Deus Ex Machina has been triggered. The weavings of the protagonist went utterly wild in order to achieve their aim. One record after another was pulled up, and an equivalent summon to anchor them onto the weavings of existence was prepared. The records of the commander of the 69th Battalion of Lumen are being brought across the weavings of existence itself. The records of the commander of the 55th Battalion of Lumen are being brought across the weavings of existence itself. The records of the commander of the 48th Battalion. One record after another that held some form of preservation and wasn't entirely eradicated by the Imperium was pulled out. All of it taken out for the usage of the Ascendant Existential Extremity clone of the protagonist. All excavated records pulse with instability, as unless something supports and completes their scattered weavings, their weavings will dissipate. The summon, Black Panther, has been brought forth to complete the commander of the 69th Battalion of Lumen and act as part of the anchor of its existence. The summon, Jormungandr, has been brought forth to complete the commander of the 55th Battalion of Lumen and act as part of the anchor of its existence. The summon, Tiamat, has been brought forth to complete the commander of the 48th Battalion of Lumen.
Ooh, a dark battery.
To maintain their weavings, an unbreakable bond has been formed with the protagonist as mana is utilized as its existential omniversal anchor. 3 blinding points of brilliance appeared nearly simultaneously. Their white gold brilliance became overlaid by a dazzling obsidian panther, a massive multicolored serpent, and the glorious visage of a 9-headed dragon whose dignity as the progenitor of dragons was unmatched. From just these 3, a transformation bloomed as their bodies soon burned with the white gold brilliance of Lumen. Standing at Omnivo, 7 existential realm of Lumen, the Panthera Wolfas of Lumen Fenrir has been successfully retrieved from eons of lost records. Standing at Omnivo, 7 existential realm of Lumen, the Serpentum of Lumen Negarius has been successfully retrieved from eons of lost records. Standing at Omnivo, 7 existential realm of Lumen, the Omniverse Drakon Tiamatherian has been successfully retrieved from eons of lost records. The 3rd, 4th, and 5th ascendant existential summons came to be under the eyes of all. Fenrisgeld lustrous white gold fur filled with obsidian stripes, a crown of pure white gold light rotating above its head as its eyes radiated a pure gold light. Light. Such a thing crackled around its body maddeningly with immeasurable velocity as its gold eyes shone brightly before they came to focus on the distant legions of omniversal pillagers. And then, only its intent could be heard as it already disappeared, its massive figure not even being visible to the naked eye. I am speed! Boom! The only thing barely discerned was a flash of white gold light already above the paracosm stage, omniversal pillagers, even before this intent spread out. Nagarius looked like a massive white gold winged omniversal serpent, its jaws opening wide at this moment as perilous seas of white gold light raged out of it.
Hey, one
Meanwhile,
more.
Omniverse Drakon, Tiamatherian, burned with glorious brilliance as its 9 heads stared coldly at the existential devouring turtle. It seemed that it was about to make a move as well, one that intended to utterly finish the existential devouring turtle with concentrated force of all newly appearing ascended existential summons. The paracosm carrying golem and tri-winged omniversal serpent saw this as a vast amount of their authority gathered protectively around the 9-headed turtle. The existential devouring turtle could not die. And just as a shocking reality beamed, speed, a single intent bloomed out again as wondrously, the visage of Fenrir materialized behind the tri-winged omniversal serpent. At the same instant, Piety, Bubbles, Nagarius, and Tiamatherion suddenly appeared around this
Bubbles.
paracosm stage omniversal pillager whose vast authority was cascading towards the Turture to aid it. Its weaving, its power, the vast majority of it was going towards the support of its strongest ally, who was carrying the weight of attacks of all of these newly appearing beings who didn't even have the influence of omniversal authorities around them. And yet, its eyes opened wide with dread, as the true target of the ascendant existential summons was actually much different than what many had believed. Chapter 3110, The Resurgence of Lumen. 1. This whole time, everything occurring was for the sake of achieving the aim of the protagonist, to obtain an existential paracosm omniversal seed. The body of a paracosm entity was protected by their own terrifying paracosm as within them, an inner existential paracosm omniverse seed spun with glory. So long as this seed was never breached, they would never perish. And even getting across this seed was an insurmountable goal, as it required one to cross the paracosm body, origin, or soul of an entity. Unless their existential paracosm could be overturned and broken, with their inner existential paracosm omniverse seed being found, one could forget about ever decimating a paracosm stage entity. The paracosm of the existential devouring turtle was a heavy one. Wrapped in layers and veils of defenses, getting across it was one of the hardest things on this battlefield. For the weavings of Lumen played a ruse. Piety was the first to show all his focus on the existential devouring turtle, and all the other ascendant existential summons followed, just until the real target was revealed. By the time Fenrir appeared before the tri-winged omniversal serpent, Piety and the rest already had it surrounded, as the dazzling spear of Piety was the first thing swung down. Before its authority could even get the chance to recover and wrap around it protectively, the visage of Bubbles blazed with white gold radiance, its slime-like body pulsed, sucking in any trace of existential paracosm authority. The brilliance and speed of Lumen fully unfolded as the immeasurably fast spear of Piety swung down cleanly. SAA, and the massive body of the tri-winged omniversal serpent only saw the blinding white gold radiance before in the next moment. A vertical cut cleanly cleaved it in two. Clang! The cut was heavy and deep as in a single thrust. The spear tip was even rebounded on a dazzling multicolored core that was now uncovered at the very center of the bisected body of the tri-winged omniversal serpent. As if it had smacked into an immovable metal, it was an inner existential paracosm omniverse seed. The moment it was uncovered by the spear of Piety, the illusory brilliance of serpentine jaws appeared in the middle of the bisected body of the tri-winged omniversal serpent and clamped down on the dazzling multicolored seed, causing immense waves of pain and dread to spread as the weavings of the tri-winged omniversal serpent felt all of this happening within the span of an instant. Protecting its inner existential paracosm omniverse seed now became a high order as its body was cut, and another will came to wrap around its most precious core. At this time, help should have arrived as the other paracosm stage omniversal pillagers reacted. Help should have arrived, But around the tri-winged omniversal serpent, who was surrounded by the ascendant existential summons, the weavings of Tiamatherion unfurled to prevent any interruptions. Insurmountable flame totems of lumen around the tri-winged omniversal serpent. Massive white gold stone-like structures that seemed like monoliths arose, intricate
It
markings
kind of
wrapped
looks
all
like he's
over them,
green.
exactly
He's green.
nine
No, he's
feet.
out of here.
The flame totems of lumen have been laid out. Streams of holy flames of lumen will constantly emanate from the flame totems omnidirectionally and burn everything they touch, creating a consecrated domain of lumen at the same time. The flame totems of lumen
Alright, that's all we wanted.
potential bursts of shock that repel all other authorities and enemies nearby and prevent them from ever getting close. The flame totems of lumen. They covered all angles as the moment they appeared. Boom! They released constant white gold shockwaves and blasts that knocked back any opposing authorities and possibilities. These totems also began to spin with radiating white gold flames in all directions. The inscriptions of dragons on their stone-like exteriors, making it seem like dragon's breath was being cast endlessly from all areas of these totems. It caused for the reality of 9 massive monolith-looking structures to isolate a single paracosm omniversal pillager, the only thing visible being constantly spinning flame totems of lumen that knocked back any other authority and enemies while spitting out a deluge of flame. This was the paracosm of Tiamatherion. Causality has tipped in the favor of the protagonist. It was an astounding scene, one that showed how deadly in battle the lineage of lumen could be. Such a reality was watched by all those here as in the far distance. The figure of martial Empress Yelena was unfathomably somber as she gazed at everything. She had lived for too long and was extremely astute, as this whole time she was looking for the answer on just who could be the master that the entities of lumen were referring to. And the answer she was being led to by her own thoughts was not a good one. As she secured the perimeter for nearly millions of light years, she affirmed only the legions of the Imperium and the Sanctus Populi here. Nobody from the Imperium would be calling out vestiges of lumen, so this left behind the Sanctus Populi. And when it further came to who could possibly call out multiple entities of lumen that could stand toe-to-toe with Paracosm stage entities, it had to at the very least be someone from the Sanctus Populi at that stage. This left behind very few possibilities. Yelena's gaze stared towards the elder Queen Mothers of Dignity and Light, but seeing their own expressions of shock and somberness, her eyes were forced to be drawn towards a single location, the figure beside Sona, a man with blazing golden pairs of wings who gazed up at the party of entities of lumen calmly and with purpose. No shock on his face, no emotion of disbelief or somberness, just calmness as if he were observing the result of his work. All of the senses of martial Empress Yelena screamed a single shocking possibility that did not at all match with the knowledge and records she knew about him, but many signs pointed towards a single man. One that, if intel was to be believed, was only a seed within an existential domain governed by the Imperium mere days ago. Chapter 3111, The Resurgence of Lumen, 2, Noah Osmond. As much as it pained her to say it, as unbelievable as it may seem, all her senses were screaming that this was the one referred to as the Master. It pained her because he was on the side of the Sanctus Populi, and the Imperium was so close to forming an alliance to combat whatever was coming. But after this, oh, Sa! Surrounded by deadly and gorgeous flame totems spewing out white gold flames, a heavy and irreversible cry boomed out from within as the taut and unbreakable bonds of Paracosm were being broken. The impossible life of a Paracosm stage entity was taken. Held down by terrifying entities who didn't even rely on the influence of omniversal laws, the terrifying monster known as piety in the lead, the deep and dense existential might of an ideal Paracosm. Crack! Shattered. The sound was a heavy one to hear, but it wasn't as heavy as what occurred next. White gold brilliance shone as the flame totems continued to spew out flames, but a blooming white gold singularity flashed far away from that location, above the legions of Sanctus Populi, besides the figures of the elder Queen Mothers of Dignity and Light, besides the gorgeous battle-ready visage of Sona. A devilishly handsome man with multiple pairs of golden flaming wings had his hand outstretched as within it, a dazzling multicolored seed floated with insurmountable brilliance. An existential paracosm omniversal seed. There was no question anymore. It could be said with clear certainty who the master these entities of Lumen were talking about. And as if to further this point home, shot. Above the head of the devilishly handsome man, a white gold circular slime, blazing with celestial wings, appeared, as its cerulean eyes were immeasurably bright. Its body coming down to start bouncing on the head of this man, as if it had been far too long. An entity of Lumen dancing on his head. The inner existential paracosm omniverse seed of a paracosm stage entity in his hand. This is the
Alright.
sudden resurgence of the
I
lineage.
think this is a good test to
The master
test to
that at
see
this moment
about
had
the
a deluge
sound
of
of
prompts
the
cascading
game
over his
audio.
eyes as the drums of booming fanfare began to
My
resound
talking
surround him.
and
An unfathomable feat
nice
to add
station.
to the fable of the protagonist. Without lifting a hand yourself, without
All
having
the
the power to do
levels.
so personally, you leave existence
we'll
in a way
save
that
this
allowed you
here.
to topple a paracosm stage existential dominium realm entity. You have obtained corrupted existential
A
paracosm
good place to
omniversal
explore.
seed. Stained by the influence of a collective consciousness of Lumen towards a certain action, the existence of this entity held the corruption of light that temporarily allowed the
Alright, people.
absolute omniversal